Welcome to the Southern Homesteading Podcast.
I'm Chuck.
And I'm Barbie.
And come along as we discuss our homesteading adventures on the Bowser Ranch. Chuck has done it again.
Yes,
he started a whole nother adventure. Now we're doing podcasts.
What have you gotten me into?
First I dragged you into a YouTube channel, and now I drag you into a podcasting.
Oh, goodness.
Yes. So this is a brand new venture for us. And if you like what you hear today, please make sure you like and comment on whatever whatever feed that you're downloading this podcast from. It kind of helps get the message out.
And make sure you follow us on our Instagram, YouTube channel, and Facebook. We're the Bowser Journal.
Well, we're part of the Bowser Journal.
Yes.
There's also Sasha, Nico, and Charlie.
Our 3 dogs.
Hence, part of the name, the name is double innuendo. What do they call that? Well, an innuendo because there's double meanings.
It's not an innuendo.
Yes.
No.
There's a name for it.
Double entendre?
Double entendre, yeah.
Is that it? I don't know.
The Bowser Ranch, it's our last name, but also we have dogs, and dogs are referred to as Bowsers. Yes. So it's kind of like a double meaning, double entendre.
That's what I'm thinking.
If you know what it is, put it in the comments and let us know. Yeah, we're 2 college educated people.
I was about to say I is a college educated person.
Yes. So let's first talk off about what you can expect to get from our podcast. And for those that are listening for the first time who may not know what a homestead is, let's start off with that. What's a homestead to you?
A homestead is using the land that we have to be more self-sufficient and to grow our own food and to have our own animals in our own garden. It's not just gardening. It's not just raising animals. It's being more, I guess, self-sustainable.
Right.
So we're not relying on the grocery store.
So my definition of homesteading has nothing to do with a home, because what if you're an apartment dweller, and what if you're growing tomatoes and peppers and herbs on your balcony? I would consider that a homesteader. To me, a homesteader would be somebody who's using the resources available to them to improve their life. That's, to me, what a homestead is. It doesn't necessarily have to have land, I don't think.
That's true.
And there's varying levels of homesteading, right? You have people who only grow gardens, who may only grow one plant, tomatoes. Or you have crazy people like us
who try to do it all.
who have 67 animals. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, not anymore, but we did.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more later.
Yes.
Exactly. So that's what we define a homestead. And you're probably wondering, okay, that's what a homestead is. Why did you decide to homestead? I'll let you answer that one.
I don't know. I kind of, in researching growing our own food and eating healthier and everything, I got very discouraged and realized that we couldn't rely on the broken food system that we have here in the U.S. You know, the animals are treated poorly. They're in horrible conditions. They're not treated humanely. They're not killed humanely. And I just wanted to know where my food came from and that our animals were living a good life and only had really one bad day in their life, and they don't even know that that's happening.
And that's why I don't have a problem with vegans or vegetarians, right? Well, it depends on what their reasoning for it is. So our daughters are vegans, or are they vegetarians? Vegan. Okay, yeah. I always get this too confused. And I asked them one day why they're vegans, and they basically said because of the way animals are treated. And if you've watched any of the videos
they're horrible.
On how animals are raised in commercial farms, I'm not talking about the traditional farm that you see, like a family running. I'm talking about the commercial thing where they have thousands upon thousands of cows, how they're treated and stuff. I totally understand that. And that's why I have no problems with that. Now, we're not vegans.
No.
But
I did come, a lot of people ask, how can you, I guess, harvest your own animals when you've raised them? And it's very hard, but if I'm going to be a meat eater, if I choose to be a meat eater, I'd rather be eating an animal that I know had a really, really good life than one that
And one
was
of the
tortured.
things, exactly, one of the things that I always say is our animals, every day was a good day. They only had one bad day.
Yeah.
Where the chicken that you buy in the store, even if you buy
Its best day was the day.
its best day was
put
the
out
day
its
that it was died
misery.
because it lived in horrible conditions. And it is hard. It is hard to harvest your own animal. It's hard to raise an animal from a baby, like a baby chick, and get attached to it.
Because we love them all.
We do. Absolutely we do. And it is hard. But you know that you have to do it if you want to sustain your body. And it's just something that you cross, and it does make you more appreciative of the sacrifice. Not the spiritual sacrifice, the life sacrifice, because you do get attached to the animal. I don't care. They say not to name your animals if you have a farm or homestead. We name ours, but although we didn't name any of the meat birds, but you still get attached to them.
So, what is this podcast going to be about, Chuck?
This podcast, in my vision, and it'll probably change as we go along, as we grow things, but
especially if our listeners give us
questions.
some really good ideas.
And we do want you guys to send us questions. So it's called the Southern Homestead because we're addressing a niche that I seem to never find enough information on, and it's growing food and the challenges from living in the South. Agriculture zones, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. There are things there are issues that we have that other people don't have. So we have friends that are homesteaders across the United States. And, some of them live in Vermont, and some live out in Utah, and some live in Oregon, and they have different, they have, nice rich soil. We have sand.
We're in Florida.
We have sand.
Hot, humid, sand.
Not very, I would call it, I wouldn't even call it soil.
No.
Soil has nutrients. I mean, there are some plants that like to grow in those conditions, but usually not the kind that you want to eat. And so that's why we started this podcast, to help other people who are in a similar journey. Now, just because if you're listening and you don't live in those agricultural zones, and we'll do another podcast later about agricultural zones, you can always look it up on the Google machine, put in your address and say, what agricultural zone am I? Because that'll tell you what plants you can grow and when to plant, all that other fun stuff. But it's going to, the stuff that we're going to discuss may help you in whatever zone that you're in. When it comes to milking. Yeah,
some of it's universal.
Absolutely. Like, for example, milking goats. Yeah, well, the way you milk a goat in Florida is going to be the same way you milk a goat in Vermont, except for you might have a fan on you when you're doing it in Vermont. I mean, in Florida. So the information I foresee here is going to be helping everybody, not just the Southern. It's just, that's our primary focus, is because,
that's what we're learning. We're learning to overcome obstacles that we face here in the heat.
Absolutely. And you mentioned questions, and that's going to help shape, the content and direction that we go with this podcast. And even if you have a question, hey Chuck, I want to grow some tomatoes, and I'm in Burlington, Vermont. Been there, done that. I mean, not growing tomatoes there, but I've been there physically. And I can give you some generalities that will help you grow those plants there, or more accurately stated, Barbie can, because she's the gardener. I'm the guy who builds the gardens. But we can give you advice. But for as far as specific advice, like I said, we know people all over the country doing homesteading. We're connected into the homesteading community. And if I don't know the answer, and I'm sure Barbie feels the same way,
we can find out.
We're not gonna make up an answer to try to make ourselves sound cool.
No,
because we are constant learners. We're only 5 or so years into the homesteading, growing food, gardening.
And our advice may work for us and it may not work for you.
Exactly. And we've seen a lot of that, because one of our resources is YouTube. And actually one of the channels we watch is Patera, Homesteading with Patera. And she hit the nail on the head. We watched one of her videos today, and she said, and I'm just paraphrasing, it's not exactly what she said.
Appalachian Homestead.
Yeah. And I'm just paraphrasing here, but she basically said, what may work for you may not work for me.
Right.
And that's absolutely true, because we have different soil types, different bugs, and bugs more often. So but still there are a lot of commonalities. So this can help even the regular gardener, the regular homesteader, and we're not going to.
It can help the person who lives in New York in an apartment that has a garden on their balcony. I mean, a lot of what we talk about can help.
Oh, absolutely, because actually 19 garden beds. One of the, we'll talk about that in a minute. One of our places that we grow is actually in what we call the cellar. It's one of our spare bedrooms with grow light. You can do that in a home, as long as you got the spare space to do that. So let's talk about our journey, and because we weren't always homesteaders. Well, I was a city dweller. I was, the only exposure I ever had to gardening was for a few years, 3-4 or so years. My parents decided to grow gardens. And I remember as a young kid, I got to do the rototiller. I got to do. I
think my parents grew a garden one year.
Yeah, and so I'm not a farmer. I didn't have that experience, but my whole homesteading experience sprouted from my desire to become more prepared. Not for the zombie apocalypse, or not because of the end of the world, or because Trump got elected. And this is not a political podcast, and I am not going to confirm nor deny what party that we like to vote for. But what I will say is, we lived through a hurricane, and this is actually before I met Barbie, the 2004 hurricane season in Florida. And if you don't remember that season, I do. I remember it very well.
I remember it.
And I remember it because that was the year that Florida got hit by not one, not two, but 5 hurricanes. And the eyes of 2 of them went directly over Central Florida, Lakeland, Plant City, Tampa. And after that hurricane hit, at this time I still had kids in the house. I was still raising kids. I was married to somebody else at the time. And so we were without power for almost just shy of 2 weeks. And the store was out of food and everything else. And I looked at that as a father, as a provider for my family, and I said, never again. Never again. So I got into the whole survival thing through that mechanism. Now, I got to admit, when I first got into it, I was your stereotypical, survivalist guy. Guns. Need more guns. Need more ammos. Need more knowledge about guns. I need to know how to store food. I need to know about drying food and I got that. So, but again, I wasn't raised that way. So I needed to figure out how to learn this stuff. And thank God for the internet nowadays, because you can get almost anything you want off the internet. And so I started researching. I found a podcast. This podcast was called The Survival Podcast by Jack Spirko. And I started listening to him when he was in episode 800 something or another. He is now like in the 3000s or the 4000s. He's been doing podcasting for 10 years or so, or maybe even longer now. And he's a great podcaster and great content. And he would talk about everything, and I would listen to it. And then he started talking about this hugelkultur, permaculture, and nematoids.
And I would hear his voice, and I would just go in the other room because I didn't want to hear any of it.
Yeah. And I'm like, I would literally turn off the podcast. I'd literally turn it off because I didn't want to hear that kind of stuff. But I did start learning some things. Like one of the things I learned from one of his episodes was how to build a rocket stove. And I built one out of bricks on our back stove, our back patio at the time. And that actually became had an impact on our life years later. Yes, it
did. And, with our last hurricane that came
last hurricane that we had, living here, it knocked the power out for 5 or 6 days or something like that.
And it flooded.
And there was 10 days that the only way you can get in or out of our neighborhood was through kayak or jumbo, because it was completely flooded. We weren't flooded on our property, but the way in and way out was. And I was prepared for it. We had 6-7 bags of charcoal. We had 2 full canisters of propane and all that other fun stuff. But you know what? I didn't know how long it was going to last. So I built I had experience with building that rocket stove years ago. And I built one out of cinder blocks on our back porch.
And we cooked outside.
And we cooked outside with the limbs that the hurricane knocked down.
Yep.
And came out of that hurricane, didn't even use the charcoal or the propane.
Yep.
So it's kind of, you never know. And that's kind of what started. So that would turn off this podcast when he would start talking about gardening and stuff. And then as I started traveling with my job and stuff, you get bored when you're sitting in a hotel at night, or you get bored when you're on an airplane. So I just let them run. And then I started hearing him talking about hugelkultur and cardboard sheet mulching and all that stuff. And when we moved up here, I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to try this. So the first bed that we tried was a raised.
Hey, where is up here, baby?
Up here is on the Bowser Ranch. It's our 3-acre homestead in what's called North Central Florida. No, it's called something else.
We're Central Florida.
It's Central Florida, but there's a name for it. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah, we're somewhere between Tampa and Ocala. A little closer to Ocala than Tampa.
And we lived in a townhome before.
And exactly.
And was looking for a little bit of land in the country, so our German Shepherds didn't have to live in a townhome anymore.
Exactly. And we found a 3-acre piece of property, and we fell in love with it right away. And we told the guy he'd have an offer in his email box before he got home, and that was indeed the case. Yeah. So we moved here, and I started to try this stuff, and it was kind of challenging at first, because at first it was just me. I was, Barbie was here. She wanted to be in the country for the dogs, but she wasn't really on board with the whole growing, canning.
No, but you never pressured me to really do anything either. I know in some of the homesteading groups we're on, husbands or wives, whichever one is on board with it, wanting to homestead, are constantly asking, how do you get your spouse to do it? You let me know the knowledge that you were learning, you shared with me, but you never pressured me to say, I want to do this now. So you kind of let me come along the journey at a slower pace on my own.
Okay, full disclosure.
Yes.
I did not think of that all on my own. That was actually an episode.
From Jack?
From Jack. How to get your spouse into homesteading or survival. So, and those are some things he said. He said, the things he said was, let them go along at their own journey. And also, if they latch on to one thing, let them run with it.
And my latching on experience was essential oils. We had started eating healthier. We were eating organic food, and I started looking at wanting to use food as medicine and natural things as, health support, and not being a victim or enslaved to the pharmaceutical companies anymore. Right. So I got really excited about essential oils, and you encouraged that. I'm a doTERRA wellness advocate now because of that. But we use things in our daily life with essential oils. So that was kind of my intro into homesteading. It was through essential oils and healthy living.
And I had slated essential oils as a skill set that I wanted to learn, but it was going to be one a little further down the line. I had other things higher priority first before essential oils. And I was kind of glad that you picked up on that. And that's why I just said, okay, great, let's do it. And then one night we decided, let's take the leap.
Let's get chickens.
Chickens, the gateway animal.
Yeah, they are a gateway animal.
That's kind of funny because
if you get chickens, you will never be the same.
No, you won't, and you'll find out pretty quickly. I always say that homesteading, there's the romance versus the reality. Mm-hmm. So you fall in love with the idea of having chickens or having a animal. And we started off with chickens, and I get free eggs, and and we get the poop.
You're not bringing those baby chicks into my house.
Yeah, exactly, and we got poop for the gardens and all that stuff, and that's fine and dandy. But then the reality hits, 4 months later, when you're having to go out there in the pouring down rain to get the eggs or to feed the chickens or to clean out the thing, because if you don't, they might get sick.
Or that's the fox came and got one of your chickens.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. And chickens are dumb as a box of rocks. But
they
are
so
stinking cute. They are cute.
We like our chicken TV.
Yes. We would literally go out there and sit down amongst them. And we've trained our German Shepherds to be amongst them as well. As a matter of fact, our male shepherd, he thinks he's a rooster. He will sit out right there in the middle of all of them and go on guard duty. And it's funny just to watch their personalities. That's where I grew an appreciation for animals and realized, you know what? They're like humans. I have a personality. Barbie has a personality. You have a personality. Chickens are the same way. They're some chickens that they'll come running up to you. Yep. We got a picture of one that actually jumped up on my lap one day. And
that she would eat out of your hand.
Yeah, and it was literally eating out of my hands. And then there's other chickens, like Red, our first rooster. He just, after he kind of got used to being here on the ranch, he didn't want nothing to do with you.
No. So our first flock of chickens, we ended up losing a few. We had the one we lost to a fox, and one that got bumblefoot, and we didn't know what it was, and we spent $80 taking a chicken to the vet.
Yeah, for those people who don't have homesteads or have never raised chickens, don't understand it. You can buy a chicken for $20.
A grown chicken.
A grown chicken for
Yeah.
$20. We wanted the animals that we were going to be eating, the chicken that we were going to be eating, to know that they had the best life possible. It falls right in with that philosophy. That's why we spent that $80 at the vet, and all of our friends made fun of us over. But I don't really consider that an $80 vet bill. I consider that an $80 class
Yes.
on how to treat
Bumblefoot. Yes.
And unfortunately, that poor girl ended up dying
Yeah.
after that anyway, a few weeks after that.
So I think now we're on our fourth flock of chickens.
Fourth flock, yeah,
Yeah.
because the first ones we had them for almost just shy of 2 years, and because of predator and sickness and illness issues, the chickens, they're frail animals, they die, and so we bought another batch, and then we got some ducks. And then we fell in love with the duck eggs and decided, well, heck, let's just sell off our chickens.
Yeah.
So we're back. We now have chickens again, meat chickens and layers, and so we're on a fourth batch now.
And then our second year that we lived here, we've been here almost 7 years now. And our second year, is it 6 or 7?
I thought it was 6, but
I think we've lived here 7, but we've homesteaded almost 6.
right.
I think. But our first garden, the second year. We lost like 90% of everything we planted because we didn't know what we were doing.
And I know how my wife is. I know that.
I do not have a green thumb.
Well, I'm not talking about that.
I did not have
I'm
a
not
green
talking about that. I'm talking about how you're A-type personality and you get frustrated if something doesn't go your way or if you don't have control over
I want
something.
to succeed.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's how I made sure I told her on several occasions that first year that we did a garden. Expect to kill most of what you eat. This year we're gonna learn what not to do.
Yeah.
We're not gonna be successful at this the first year. We're learning how not to garden.
But each year our garden has gotten better and better, and we've learned how to handle tomato hornworms, and we've learned what to do when this pest comes or that pest comes, and we've learned that my tomatoes will only plant or will only grow right out my back door off of my deck. I can't put them where I want to put them.
Yeah, the first tomatoes that we grew here, and those are the ones that I grew them in, I watched a YouTube video on doing tomatoes in 5-gallon buckets. And I had them growing right off our back deck, and they were just going gangbusters. And then that's when we first got exposed to
Overnight,
the hornworm.
The hornworm ate them.
And you want to talk about an alien-looking insect. Look up hornworm, and they're hard to find during the day. But then Barbie's like, well, I don't want tomatoes off my back porch. I want them. Let's put them down in the back 40 in the corner of the 3-acre lot, where that way,
Yeah, they didn't grow.
No, they didn't.
I think we got 2 tomatoes off of the plant.
Exactly.
Right now, off the back porch, we have about 150 on the vines.
I think this morning you said 147.
Yeah.
And they are about out of how many plants, though? We had, 40 plants?
Probably about 40 plants. Yeah.
And then we have
all different kinds.
All different kinds, not all one kind.
We plan on canning this year.
Yeah, canning and salsa. Yes, salsa. Go good with my ghost peppers and our Carolina Reapers that I'm growing. Absolutely.
But we've come a long way.
We have. And so, like I said, going back to our whole chicken being a gateway animal. And now we have just under 40 animals here at the Bowser Ranch. We have 4 goats, 2 pigs, 5 rabbits, 4 ducks, 2 geese, 20 laying chickens. We just harvested 35 meat chickens. And, of course, our 3 dogs. You can't forget them.
Fish in the aquaponics system.
Oh, yeah. There's at least 50 tilapia in there. And so we have, I would consider it a hobby farm or a moderate homestead. There's some people that don't have any animals in their homestead, but we have a little bit of everything. And our goal is to basically learn a couple new skill sets every year.
And we want to be able to grow probably about 80% of our food.
That's our final goal.
Yes.
80% or above. And we've actually had meals where we sat down and everything on that plate came from...
So we had our chicken and our green beans the other night.
Yeah, exactly.
So...
And in that process, so we do have a whole bunch of animals, and like I said, my wife is the one who's in charge of the gardening. I'm the one who builds the gardens for her. And how many gardens do we have now, baby?
18, I think.
18 garden beds.
I mean, some of them aren't huge, though. Some of them are raised beds. Some are, we've got a couple of food forests.
And
we have in-ground beds.
In-ground beds.
Hugelculture.
Hugelculture, yeah. So we have a bunch of different types of beds. It's always an experiment. I've been tinkering around with hydroponics. I've been tinkering around with a thing called the Kratky method. Actually, I did a YouTube video on the cucumber Kratky experiment.
Yeah.
And actually, I need to get that going again because it's that time of the year.
Mm-hmm. And recently, how many pounds of chicken did we get from our 35 chickens?
200 pounds of chicken.
Amazing.
In our freezer.
Our freezer is full.
Yes. If you do gardening, you probably heard of a thing called a gorilla cart.
Yeah.
It's a black.
It's a must-have item.
If you're gardening, you got to have it. It's a heavy-duty cart, gardening cart, and people use it to haul dirt, wood chips, and stuff like that. I had that thing completely filled with chicken.
Yes, you
completely
did.
filled with chicken.
Yes, you did.
To haul it from to take it from the where we harvest the chickens down to the house because I didn't want to carry 200 pounds of chickens by hand. And we're doing this. You're probably thinking, man, you're doing all that stuff. You guys must be professional farmers. Retired farmers. No. We have 2 full-time jobs.
Yep.
2 full-time jobs, and we're still doing all this stuff. And what we find is your time management skills become even more critical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it only takes us about 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening to feed, water, and let out or put up the animals.
And I would say that's on the outside.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even think it's really 30 minutes. I mean, if one person did it, maybe 30 minutes, but.
And then maybe a few hours at night tending to the garden throughout the week.
Right.
It's the bigger projects, the building the chicken coops and building the garden beds to start with, that is time consuming at first.
Yes. And when you build that infrastructure, it makes those other jobs easier. When you build that, when you spend 3 weekends building that automatic waterer for the goats or for the chicken, well, now instead of having to take water out to them every single day, you're going out and filling up the 55-gallon drum
once a week,
once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
There's benefits from those infrastructure investments that you spend that time. It helps reap the savings and the time on the back end of that.
And it's weird. Well, I guess it's not weird, but it doesn't seem, when we're out there feeding the animals or I'm out there working in the garden, except when I'm getting, like, planting the garden, that's a huge thing because that's a lot of time. But just the day-to-day in the garden or taking care of the animals, there's reward in it. It's, I don't know, something about being out there and communing with nature and knowing that you're growing.
Okay. So my family members who already call me hippie
on green beans
now really think we really are hippies because now we're talking to our plants. No, but
I don't talk to my plant.
Well, with the way you just described
communing
it,
with nature.
Yeah, and the reason I say this is because we bought a school bus a few years ago.
I talk to my animals.
There you go. I do too. We bought a school bus several years ago, and we were going to convert it into a camper. And all my family members were calling us the Partridge Family and hippies and stuff. And now here's my wife talking about communing with nature. And
no, there's something relaxing about it. I've been known to milk a few goats now. So even going out in the morning when they're in milk and sitting there and milking, I'm hearing the birds chirp and the goats are making their little goat noises. And there's just something peaceful.
I know that some of the people that you work with have degrees in psychology and stuff like that. I bet if you ask them, there's
definitely known. A mental health benefit.
Known.
There's got to
known.
be.
Absolutely, it's known. And but the thing is, so you listen to hear, well, Chuck, you guys have so many animals and you got so many garden beds and all that stuff, and man, how am I going to do that? Well, we didn't do this all at once.
No.
It was
don't jump in at once because you'll get discouraged.
Yeah, you learn, like I said. Pick one skill or one thing, like chickens. Learn that. Once you're good with that and you're comfortable with that, and it's second nature. Then add something else, a garden bed or another type of animal. We didn't move here and then on day one said, okay, let's have 67 animals on the property the next day. Yeah, it was a process. It was just kind of snuck up on us. Even to this day, we still don't consider ourselves experts by any stretch of the imagination, but what I do consider myself, and I don't know, you have the Barbie answer for herself, but I consider myself a constant learner. You have to always be learning. All my downtime, I'm always listening to a podcast or reading something or watching YouTube videos and something because I want to learn something new.
And with gardening and tending to livestock, you really only learn when you fail.
Oh, that's true. Oh, absolutely. That's true. Yeah.
So don't be afraid to fail. One of the YouTube people we listen to, Justin Rhodes, he said, plant where you're at, or just plant, just start.
Right. You will die of analysis paralysis if you I don't know enough yet. I got to learn this. No, just plant it. A tomato plant from the store costs you $3.
Yep. Put it in a pot and stick it on your back porch.
Exactly. And in a future podcast, we'll tell you how you can make that one single $3 plant multiple plants.
Yes.
You can turn that one plant into 10 plants.
Yes.
20 plants.
Well, and this year, all of our plants came from our seed that we collected.
Right.
Well, I did buy some seed, but it all came from seeds. So
Right.
you don't have to put a whole lot of money into it. A packet of seed from M.I. Gardner is 99 cents.
So we've kind of gone over on this podcast. We really expect each podcast to be roughly about 30 minutes in length, and we'll probably do about once a week. This intro probably went a little bit long. I don't know what the time is because I'm not really looking at the screen at the moment. But so if you get the chance, make sure you visit our YouTube channel, visit us on Instagram or Facebook. Just look up the Bowser Journal.
Yes, because it's Southern Homesteading Podcast by the Bowser Journal.
Right.
So.
Exactly. And also help us with your journey by submitting questions and ideas for future ideas for content. You might have a question where you might be able to answer, or we might have to reach out to one of our friends and stuff, and then we'll do a podcast about it.
Yep. So until next time, live your own story.